Hi, I wanted to introduce you to one of our dogs. This is Phoebe. She's my new Bernedoodle puppy. And so she might be in and out of the pictures a little bit. She's only 4 months old, but I'm hoping that she'll work with me in therapy when she gets a little older. So just so you know, Phoebe. So in this video, what I want to talk about is the cognitive motor system. And have you start thinking about different ways that this may affect the kids, your children, your students, your clients, and so you can think about cognitive motor as the difficulty with initiation of movement, inhibition of movement, and sustaining movement. So examples of initiation, the first example I have is if you have a student that's in your classroom and they're sitting at their desk and they, you ask them, Johnny, can you go get the whiteboard marker from the blackboard? And Johnny doesn't get up. Oftentimes how that's interpreted from a behavioral perspective is that they aren't listening, or they're being non-compliant. So it's often looked at in a behavioral sense. But if you start considering the neuroanatomy and what you need to have good cognitive motor control, that child needs to be able to hear the request, hold it in his brain, and then get up and make his body do it. Those neurons are not well connected. So that's one example of initiation. Another example of initiation is maybe getting your voice out. So oftentimes I've met a large number of children who have worked with speech therapists and have been able to figure out how to say the word hi or bye. But when the context is such that it's appropriate to say hi or goodbye, they don't initiate it on their own unless their parent or therapist asks them to. And so they're waiting. It's like they need that external prompt in order to be able to do that. So they have difficulty initiating meaningful language. Inhibition. We can think of inhibition in terms of maybe a child has a certain pattern of words, echolalia, or a pattern of words that come out of their mouth that they say frequently. We'll get into that in another video about unreliable speech. But if they have certain set patterns, and it goes to the neuroanatomy, they can't inhibit. And a really good video to watch, if you can find it, is Jamie Burke, Just Say One Word First. And I know in there he talks about words of annoyance, and so he communicates through typing, but his the words that would be coming out of his mouth might be like, Mickey loves Donald Duck, which has nothing to do with what he's talking about. And so, again, we'll get into this when we start talking about the written word and ways to support meaningful language, but they can't inhibit having that come out. Another example is if a child is, maybe their stuck thing is that they are stuck on light switches. And so as soon as they see that light switch, they know what it's for, and they can't inhibit going up and turning it on and off. Let's see, another example of inhibition, for all of the kids who don't regulate walking. And so they may walk out of a classroom and start running down the hall. That's another example of inhibition. Sustaining. So one way you can think about sustaining is if a child starts to hit a drum and then they stop, you can think that for you or I, we might pause for a minute because maybe we're thinking about something else and we're like, oh, I'm supposed to be playing the drum, and start playing again. Well, for someone with autism, they don't have that good working memory, that good connectivity in their frontal lobe, and so they might have difficulty with sustaining that movement. And so it's just a different way to think about why kids with autism, why people with autism do things the way they do, and that when you're considering the behavioral reason for something, I think too often with kids with autism, it's described just purely, and that's how applied behavior analysis works, purely on what you're seeing on the outside. So if somebody gets away and walks away from you, the assumption is that they're not, that they're avoiding you, or, there's the different behavioral terminology. But if you start to think about that difficulty with cognitive motor control, then you can start giving them supports that will work. And it takes away that negativity. Because I think kids with autism understand what we're saying to them. They understand almost everything. And it's our job to figure out why they're doing something. And too often I hear things said around them like, oh, they're just trying to escape, they're just looking for attention. When if you start to consider the cognitive motor difficulties, you can treat it much more respectfully, I guess. And you can start to collaborate with parents and the kids in terms of what supports will work for them.